Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and round and round.
Hey, Liz.
Hi, Maggie. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's a good, beautiful morning to talk about savings rates.
That is the most beautiful day to talk about savings rates.
Who doesn't want to start their day with a discussion? A cup of coffee and some savings rates, you know? What else can a girl ask for?
I agree. Wait, what are you drinking? That's not coffee.
I was going to joke, said as sipping water.
Oh, yeah.
But I did drink some coffee before this, and it was lovely. And you have a cup of coffee.
I do.
Or something in that cup.
Or something. I mean, it is Liz gets loaded, not Liz stays hydrated.
No judgment. As long as you can get through a discussion on savings rates, you can drink whatever you want. While you're sipping your coffee, for those who aren't sure where they are, welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast. This is a personal finance podcast focused on redefining wealth from the inside out. Every week, I speak with a rotating set of co-hosts about a different financial topic to help you improve your financial mindset and tactics. Today, we have got co-host Liz here, and we are talking about, I think one of your... I always say it's one of our favorite topics, but...
I am very guilty of using the word favorite extremely liberally.
Yeah. Well, a topic we both have interesting thoughts on is probably a good thing. But it is a big metric that you want to focus on if trying to get to early retirement or just financial independence is your savings rate. So we're going to talk about everything savings rate related today.
Yep. We'll talk about like why it's the number one thing that you want to track if you're aiming for early retirement, like how to measure it, how we measure it, and then of course the all important, like how you increase it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, so I think it's helpful to just start with what a savings rate is, right?
Yeah.
You should tell us, Liz.
Well,
Mainly because we'll get into why you actually know a lot more about savings rates than I do.
at the highest level, it's just what percentage of your income you save versus what you spend. And we're going to talk about, I've seen 17 million different ways that people get out their spreadsheets and calculate their actual savings rate. But at the end of the day, it's just how much did you save? If you made, if your net income was 100K for the year and you saved 20K, then your savings rate would be 20%.
Yeah. And I read a stat recently that you told me, so that's where I read it, Liz, that the personal savings rate in the U.S. is like 3.6% after taxes. And this does not include any payroll deductions for your 401k.
That's true. And that's from the federal government. I forget which agency, but the Bureau of something.
Labor statistics. I feel like that's
Maybe.
a bureau that puts out a lot of data.
Yeah.
That does not include like your 401k contributions, right?
Right. I was trying to look around and understand, I don't know. I think it's really hard to get to sort of quote unquote like average statistics in the US because a lot of the things you read, and I've done a bunch of episodes about this, are like very salacious. Like someone will be like, did you know the average American is only saving 3%? And then it's like, oh, but it doesn't count, pension or 401k or any retirement.
Yeah, it doesn't include one of the largest savings vehicles available to people.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that. I will say a lot of the stats that I know we've both seen around debt implies the savings rate is pretty low on average.
Yeah.
Right. And so people, I don't think it's a far leap to say the average person is not saving enough. And look, we just, in the past couple months did an episode on emergency funds and why that's so important, how much to save. So I think that's worth listening to. But you want to have savings for a lot of reasons, not just early retirement. It might just be FI and it might just be an emergency fund, right? You can kind of work your way up or down that spectrum of how much savings you want to have and why. But if you have any sort of long-term goals to take some time off, retire early, or just have like a lot of FU money, you need to... You want to increase your savings rate.
Right.
It can be really important.
Yeah, it's a good idea to spend less than you make each month for like a big variety of reasons. I think and listen, stop me because I will fully go down the rabbit hole on this. I think when I try to look for statistics, when I try to look for data to kind of understand like what's happening with people in the US, there's like, I don't want to downplay that there are real economic challenges for a large number of people. And like a 3.6% savings rate is very low. And that's because of those economic challenges. And at the same time, I feel like there's this weird narrative sometimes of like Americans are lazy and they spend all their money and like no one knows how to save. And I just don't. I'm always trying to avoid that like weird shaming that we seem to like to do. Anyways, most people are saving, on average, people are saving about 4% of their income, like after of what they get in their paycheck and what deposits, and then like what goes out the door.
Yeah.
But we can do better than that.
And it's an average. So that means lots of people, you got people who are saving 50% plus, and you got people who are saving 0 or negative.
Yeah.
Something. Yeah.
How much do you save, Maggie? What's your savings rate?
Well, I think my savings rate now is negative. Right. I was trying to think how I would even calculate it now, but because my denominator doesn't have enough in it.
Right.
But I never tracked my savings rate.
You've told me that before, and every time I am shocked by that.
But I will say I did track my expenses and I did track my net worth. Mm-hmm. And those are the numbers around your savings rate. Mm-hmm. Like I knew what I spent in a year. I knew how my net worth was increasing. I could go back and look at my salary. I mean, I could have gotten to my savings rate. I think I was always challenged with thinking it was not worth me trying to measure it because when I started really measuring a lot of this stuff, I was pretty focused on getting to early retirement. And so I was more focused on that 25 times number in my net worth and knowing my expenses so I knew what to do 25 times. Right. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you could go back and listen to an episode about the math of early retirement. We'll put a link in the show notes to it. But I did know my expenses and I did know my net worth. And those to me felt important. And again, I think savings rate is really important and we'll get into why. But no, I did not track it. You could still get by without it. But it's a pretty important metric. I think I was overwhelmed by, I had a lot of incoming and outgoing funds rolling through our accounts, which were things from like volunteer roles where I was reimbursed for a lot of stuff, child support and exes where we're paying people back for things. And I just felt like I was constantly moving money in and out of different accounts and Venmoing somebody for this and, had 20 Venmos coming in for some end of year coach's gift. And then I've got it just felt complicated for me to track. I'll leave it at that. And I probably overcomplicated it in my head, but I could go back into it. So we could talk about, you're going to get into like some of the different methods. And I mean, I definitely spent a few years in the like 75 to 80% range of how much I was saving as my savings rate. Not all the years, a few years.
That makes perfect sense. Ultimately, if you're trying to reach financial independence, like the ratio of your expenses to your net worth is actually that's the only number you need.
Yeah.
And what savings rate gets you is sort of like your velocity, right? Like how quickly are you moving towards that?
That's a great way of saying it because the speed, which we'll talk about, and knowing your velocity is incredibly motivating.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think too, I mean, to your point, you knew, like I think you said you knew you were setting whatever percentage like into your deferred compensation plan. So like you knew at minimum your savings rate was like that number or higher.
Yeah.
And the nitty gritty of like, oh, am I saving like 39 or 40% or like, 55 or 60%? Like that's not necessarily the most important thing.
Yeah. I also think I learned about early retirement a little later on my journey. Mm-hmm. And so I had actually, not for the goal of early retirement, already saved up a good bit by the time I even knew of early retirement as a thing. So I was less motivated by measuring my velocity at that point. I had already gotten some good years in. And so I think that's another reason. Like if I was earlier on, that velocity measurement would be really important to me. Because I think the chart of like how many years, which we'll talk about, but that the view of, how many years you have to work for how many years you have to save is like a fascinating metric.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too. And I think maybe this it goes to the point of what you were just saying. The further along you are, like the more you have invested, the closer you actually get to your early retirement number, the less your savings rate matters, because the money that you already have invested is actually making like a much bigger impact on your net worth than what you're saving this year.
Yeah, that's a much better way of saying what I was trying to say. Well done.
Well,
So what has your savings rate been?
well, it's gone up and down a lot. So
Which is kind of cool to measure it, though, because you have like
Yeah.
reasons for why it's gone up and down.
yeah, exactly. Like there is, and we'll kind of talk about this in a minute. There's this like very famous chart from like this guy who wrote a blog, Mr. Money Mustache, and he says like, okay, like if your savings rate is 5%, you got to work for like, I don't know, 40 something years. If it's 10%, you got to work for like 30 something years. And it's just interesting because no one's savings rate is consistent, right? It's totally normal. It's going to go up and down. Like as you have different jobs, as you have kids, as you retire, like there's all these different phases of life. But for us, I would say early, like when I was in my 20s, I was like, I don't know. I mean, I was probably putting 10 or 15% into my retirement, and then I had money left over. So like, let's say I was in the 15 to 20% range. And then I got really like, I was like, wait, did you know that people are allowed to retire early? Like, did you know it's not the law? You have to work until you're 65.
There's a
or
different
whatever?
path in life.
Yeah. I just didn't even know that was a thing that like normal people were allowed to do. And then I got kind of serious about it, and we were above 50% for a long time. We were like, you know, in our early 30s, like living kind of lean, you know, really getting some traction in our careers. And it was like, oh, we can, like, instead of spending more money, let's invest. And so we were above 50%. And then I don't know if you remember, but there was a global pandemic, and we decided, like a lot of people, we were like, let's buy a big house because we are at home. We work from home. We live at home. We are in our house 99% of the time. Let's buy like a much nicer home. And then my savings rate dropped to, I would say, like 30 to 50. It was probably averaging like 35, 40%. And I will tell you, it was like an identity crisis for me. I had gotten so attached to that 50% savings rate. I was like, that's who I am.
Well, I think that's actually why savings rate is such a cool metric. Even though I didn't track it, it's such a cool metric because when you bought that house, you immediately saw the trade-off of it. Mm-hmm. It would have been harder and taken longer to see the trade-off of it in your net worth. It would have taken like time of you all of a sudden having a bigger payment and seeing that your net worth is growing at a slower rate, but then also trying to account for the fact that the market's doing good or bad. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it's hard to measure that, but it's super easy to see, okay, if we buy this house, we're going to go from a 50% savings rate to a 40% savings rate. How do we feel about that? You know, and like
Right.
it's an intentional conscious trade-off. And so I think that alone is a great example of why it is a really great metric to track.
Maggie, you're so good. I feel like every time I come on the podcast and I'm like, here's the thing I did that like maybe wasn't that smart. You're like, no, you're so smart and pretty. And you made such an intentional choice. I love that for you.
Well, you do things very intentionally. So, and you can afford to do them too, right? Like if you were like in debt, I wouldn't be building you up like that.
Yeah.
I would be like, oh my gosh. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do that either. But I would say like, oh, you know, that's you really want to like reconsider if that's an intention, or I would take it offline with you perhaps, you know.
I don't know. I think that
Wouldn't
would
do
be
this
good
in front of everybody.
podcast content.
You're right. It would be. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. There are people who do that. There's
Well, Ramit kind of does it.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Not in a mean way. He's not mean about it, but he's tough. He's like tough love, you know?
There's another account I'm thinking of. The reason I was pausing is because there's a curse word in the title. But there's
What's the
an
account?
Instagram account called Bitch I'm Budgeting, and I love her so much. And she like does these reels where people send her their budget, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing? Stop spending money on this! Like, you gotta get over here. You gotta." And it's just
Well, that's a little
great.
bit of what Cash Cuties does, but also in like a funny, friendly way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's a little bit of what Ramit does too. I guess I guess this market is covered. We should probably just stick to
I
what
know.
we're doing.
We're not gonna. Yeah, let's get back to savings rate.
Okay.
Okay, so this is like a super important metric.
It is.
It's not about what you make. It is about what you spend. And really the difference between what you make and what you spend. And we've teased this classic Mr. Money Mustache chart, but why don't you like do your best to verbally lay out 2-column chart? I think you can do it.
Yep. So
Because you're pretty, you're smart, and all those other things you said about yourself earlier. They're very true.
I do say. I was saying you say those.
I know. I meant the things you said I say. Like
Right.
I agree with them and like I restate them.
Every morning I just look in the mirror and I'm like, Liz, you are so pretty and so smart.
You should look in the mirror and say, Liz, Maggie thinks you're so pretty. You're so smart. your what's the Saturday Night Live one where she's like, do you remember that?
What can you tell me more about it?
Nope. That's all I can tell you.
Okay,
nope.
great.
If I could remember, I could remember. Let's move on. It'll come to me later, and then I'll bring it.
Well,
Look, listen for the end of the episode, and you'll figure out which SNL skit I'm thinking of.
great. So there is, I think we've probably even talked about it on the podcast before, but there's a very famous blog post called The Shockingly Simple Math of Early Retirement, written by a guy who had a blog called Mr. Money Mustache. And he has this 2-column chart, right? So it's like, here's your savings rate, and this is how many years you have to work until retirement. And it works for all income. Like, I think instinctively you look at it and you're like, well, that's fine if you like have a high income, but it works for all incomes because it's just based on percentages. And it's saying like, if you're spending this percent of your money, then like this is how long it's going to take you to retire. And it's really interesting because at the lowest rate that he lists, if you save 5% of your income, you're going to have to work 66 years until you have enough to retire. And enough to retire, we're generally thinking of as about 25 times your expenses. I would say what a lot of people aim for, right? Like what the experts might say is aim for 15 or 20%. If you're saving 15% of your income, you have to work for 43 years. If you just bump that up to 20% of your income, which I'm not saying that's easy for everyone, but it's like a reasonable change.
Yeah, it's a 5% change.
Right. Then you drop to only having to work 37 years. You take 6 years off of your career.
Yeah, that's great. I did the math for you. I was impressed if you bumped out with 6 so fast.
Oh.
I was like ready for it. I was like, that's 6 years. That's 5% change for 6 years sooner.
Right.
But then you get to like, if you could have, like, let's say you could have a 50% savings rate.
Yeah.
You could work for 17 years. Right. And that's, I mean, I think about, like, I sometimes quote to make myself feel better that I did once have a job. I'm like, I worked in a corporate career for 20 years and I worked in in a lot of like odd jobs during high school and college for another 8 to 10 years before that. But like, you could work for 17 years. Like, you don't even have to want to do that, but like to have that level of freedom and to be able to think like, I don't have to do this for the rest of my life, especially if you don't necessarily like love what you do, or you just want more freedom and choices in life. It's just a pretty cool stat to think about.
Yeah, it is I think these numbers are really interesting. And when I was looking at it this morning, I think the way I often talk about this and the way I hear other people talk about it is that example we just gave, right? Like if you can just go from 15 to 20, you can cut 6 years off. And I think a sort of counterpoint there is as you get further down, like that 5% doesn't always equal 6 years less of working, right? When you go from 50 to 55%, it only shaves 3.5 years off. If you go from 70 to 75%, that only shaves 1.5 years off, which just kind of, I guess the point is in those earlier numbers, you get a lot of bang for your buck. And those final miles, they're like, oh, if I just like cut Netflix, or if I like, if I can just get from like 70 to 75%, like that's not going to make a meaningful difference. But going from 15 to 20 or 20 to 25 is going to make a much bigger difference.
And it's, it can be much easier to grow your savings rate over time also we'll talk about this more, but just, as you start to make more money and don't inflate your lifestyle. So I think it would be helpful to transition to how specifically you measure your savings rate, because there's a lot of people I think get hung up in the technicalities. And even when I see this chart, you said this earlier, but I look at it and for a minute I'm like, wait, how can this chart work without knowing my expenses? And I think as we explain a little bit more, it will help land it for people.
Great. So this is the part of the podcast where we talk about math out loud on an audio podcast, and you just got to bear with us because we're going to do our very best to make it adorable and entertaining.
Buckle up.
Buckle up. So your savings rate, like we talked about, at the highest level, it's a fraction. So it's how much you saved, like your net income. So like how much you earned. I always do it after taxes. Some people do it before taxes. I can't imagine why, but like, I don't know. It's fun to know the number, I guess. But your post-tax income minus your expenses divided by your income, right? Like, and again, that's a lot of words. Again, let's say you make 100K after taxes and you spend 80K and you don't spend 20K, then your savings rate would be 20%. But so I mentioned earlier, like I felt like there was this huge part of my identity that was like very tied to my savings rate. And I don't know if you remember, Maggie, but for a while, Instagram has changed. Like I feel like now it's all, I don't know, reels and goofiness. But back when it was more static posts, I followed a lot of people who would post their savings rate every month, and they would have a little tracker. Like here's what it was in January, February, March, etc. Like here's my kind of running total for the year. And I felt very motivated by that. I was like, I am going to track it down to the penny. I'm going to make my pretty, Instagram post, and I'm going to post it, and I'm going to be like, my savings rate was over 50%, and people are going to like it, and I'm going to get a lot of joy out of this.
Yeah. Did that pan out?
I
was like, wait, and then what happened?
I've definitely like relaxed away from that. But what I found when I was in that mode of like, this is something I'm sort of in a fun way obsessed about a little bit, was that people would track it in any number of different ways. So starting with like what counts as savings, right? So net income minus your expenses. The simplest way to do it would be like what deposits in your bank account, and then like what did you spend money on, right? But then you can sort of do these adjustments to that number. So some people would only count like money you actually invested. So if you have money left over in the month and it's just sitting in your savings account, they're like, oh, no, that doesn't count. Like it has to be.
Because you didn't like bank it. It's not quote saved yet.
Yeah, you didn't like invest it. Some people would count the principal portion of their mortgage payment as savings.
That gets complicated. But I can see why mentally you're like, well, I put that money towards principal.
Right, exactly. Like it's increasing my net worth because it's lowering the value of my mortgage. I emailed Andrew last night and we exchanged a little. I was like, I'm doing this episode with Maggie tomorrow. Like, do you have anything?
I saw that.
He sent me like a very long email. And he counts mortgage because he's like, yeah, it lowers the balance on that debt. And so that counts as savings.
But I think at any point, if you're glossing over at this, remember, this is one of those things that we talk about a lot, which is like, get it 80 to 90% right. Mm-hmm. You don't need, if the details are stressing you out, forget about them.
Right.
And just do it in a way that works for you and is simple. Right. But I do think it's worth going through all of this of like, the considerations of what to include and not include. But this kind of gets into like a little bit of why I didn't track it. Because I was sort of like, ugh, okay.
I think I did a post at one point. I was like, hey, I tracked my savings rate like 6 different ways. And like, here are 6 different numbers I could come up with. And it was anywhere from like 30-something% to 50-something%. So really, again, to just underscore what Maggie just said, the way you calculate it is not that important. If you calculate it consistently, like just pick a way and stick with it. And then you just know, like, okay, am I trending up? Am I trending down? A big one is 401k and paycheck deductions, because that's where like a majority of my saving and investing is happening. If you have 401k, if you have HSA, especially if you have like mega backdoor 401k, so you could put even extra money into your 401k on top of the, $20-something thousand match, or cap, that is a big one. And so I would definitely count that. And basically I take like what deposited into my bank account, and then I just look at like what went into my 401k and I add that back. And I'm like, wait, no, I still get credit for that. Like I saved that.
No, I agree. I would totally include that. Again, that's a huge, especially if but it doesn't really matter if it's small or large, it's something towards that. And if you're maxing it out, that's like $23,000, $24,000 a year.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a lot of money. And then the employer match too, I think there would be. I remember being involved in some spirited online conversations about whether to count your, some real fun at dinner parties. Yeah. Anyways, whether to count it. I actually always count employer match as both. Like it's income and then I saved it. Like I don't think it can just add it to my savings, because it's like money that my employer paid to me and then it was just automatically saved and invested.
Yeah. So that's the top of the fraction. That's how much you saved.
Right, exactly.
Things to consider including or excluding, but consistently, to your point.
Right. Yeah.
Well, then we go down below to the bottom of the fraction.
Yep, the denominator, but
how much you made.
Exactly. So the bottom of the fraction is how much you made. And of course, the easiest thing is like your income and then minus what you paid in taxes. But then some folks for income will also count investment dividends. So you can go into your 401k plan, your taxable brokerage, anywhere that you have money invested, and look at what your dividends were. They probably got automatically reinvested, but you might have investments that are paying out, anywhere from a few $100s to thousands of dollars in dividends. And do you count that as income or not? I never have. I've always counted that as like that. In my mind, that's the same as growth. Like it's the same as if the value of the shares went up.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
Some people have counted that differently.
Did Andrew count that?
I don't remember.
He's very detailed. I could see him counting that, but
he might have done it. Yeah. I mean, just for fun.
But yeah, I mean, even to like consider like credit card cash back and bank interest, like that's where to me it starts to get, if anyone wants permission to be like, yeah, don't worry about that, I'll give it to you. Because it gets like overly tedious And again, if it's fun for you, like we'll get overly tedious on tracking our expenses. That's fun for us. So if you enjoy it, go do it. If that's the thing that's going to push you off ever tracking this, ignore it, right?
Exactly.
And just focus on like getting it roughly correct and consistent, to your point.
Yeah. There was a time in my life, again, when I feel like I'm like half joking, but I'm being kind of serious. I was like very serious about my savings rate. And if it was below 50%, I was like bummed. I felt like
you could no longer look in the mirror every morning and give yourself those affirmations. By the way, I figured out the SNL skit.
Oh.
I will not tell you till the end of the episode.
Oh, shoot. Okay. You're like,
I got to make you have something to stick around for, Liz.
I thought you were encouraging me to go quickly.
Oh, no, I just meant, I want you to stay for the whole episode.
Yeah.
You listener and you, Liz. But I do remember now, Andrew actually does track, because he tracks selling things in his expenses, and he tracks credit card cash back. So it would sort of be in there. But selling things is another thing. Like I know Andrew tracks this against his expenses, because he'll have a year where he sells some really expensive photography equipment or a bike. For $5,000, right? And he bought a new bike for 10, and so he only wants to count $5,000 as the expense, which is totally fair.
Well, so it's interesting though, because if you really want to get nerdy about how to do it, you'll get a different number when you're calculating your savings rate if you count that as an offset against your expenses versus counting it as income. So we actually just had this. We got, oh my gosh, what's it called? So when you have a mortgage and you have an escrow account, like they review it every year. Yeah. And
they give you like a refund because you've overpaid or underpaid.
Yeah, exactly.
They either charge you or
Right. And so we, for whatever, well, I know why. It's because I often end up prepaying my property taxes. But if you have an overage, they send you back a check. And so that has happened to me several times. And I think this year we got a check for like $1,700 or something. And we kind of debated, how should we put it into our tracker? Should we lower our mortgage expense, or should we count this as income? And ultimately I was like, let's add it to income, because when I'm actually getting close to early retirement, I want a more accurate representation of our expenses. And I don't want to like count in my average that my mortgage was lower in 1 month, because your mortgage isn't like often going to be lower, or it's not guaranteed to have that 1 month when it's going to be lower. I was like, I want to err on the side of tracking my expenses higher. Like that seems like the more conservative approach. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay.
I'm tracking.
Anyways.
I like to err on the conservative side when measuring most things.
Right, exactly. And I'm not, once I get to early retirement, I'm not like measuring my income. Like I know what my income's going to be, because it's going to be how much I'm pulling out. So it has less of an impact there. Again, to underscore what Maggie said, the bottom line is like, there's a bunch of different things you can do here. You can play around this sandbox all day. You definitely don't have to. If it's fun, then do it. And if it is not fun, there's some simpler ways to get your savings rate too. I have like a very simple spreadsheet. I don't do the thing. I used to like add my bank interest. I used to add my credit card cash back. I don't anymore. I have a very simple tab on my spreadsheet. I put in the gross amount of our paychecks, the taxes, and then our expenses. And then I have a little formula that tells me like what the savings percentage was. And then there's even simpler things you can do. Maggie, do you look at the savings rate in Monarch Money?
I don't, and I will admit I didn't even know it had one.
So this is a section of every episode where we talk about how much we love Monarch Money, even though they don't pay us 1 cent.
I do love Monarch Money. They don't.
They don't. But when you go into Monarch Money, which is now, and again, this is going to sound salesy, but it's not, is the official financial tracking software of every single co-host.
It is.
Money. We all use it.
I formally called myself I'm going to call Greg an influencer, because he did influence, I don't know if he influenced everybody, but he influenced a lot of people. At least 4 people. Wait, where is it in there? Which tab? Transactions?
It's under cash flow.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Where's the rate though?
If you tap on the number, it changes to a percentage.
Oh, guess what mine is?
I don't,
0. I don't think it gives you a negative
Okay.
one. That's cool. You get an actual percentage?
Yeah, it does give me an actual percentage. And the thing about Monarch Money, I mean, I love Monarch Money. It tracks money coming in, money going out. It gives you a lot of helpful reports and tools. I'm a big fan. Of course, Monarch Money, it doesn't have access to like your payroll system. So it doesn't know what you paid in taxes or what your 401k contributions were. But it's a really easy, simple way to just get a number.
Yeah. My number should be 0. I haven't received my 1 DCP payment this year.
Right.
And I I'm at the point where I'm spending more. I'm in drawdown, so it's zero. I don't think they go negative in here, so I think that's why it's zero.
That's kind of them. But it's interesting because I looked. So my annual bonus was paid out in March, and I did my own calculation. And because my bonus was paid out, our savings rate was really high. It was 70-something%, which is just an anomaly because I had an extra high income that month. And then I went and I was curious and I looked in Monarch. And because I was like, oh, my bonus is coming. Okay, put more in my 401k. Okay, like put more in my HSA. I had a bunch of taxes taken out, et cetera, et cetera. The Monarch said my savings rate was like 35% for that same month, which is fine. Like, it doesn't matter if it's in the 30s or something. Just knowing, again, like, is it going up? Is it going down? Is it generally the same each month is helpful, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I though I didn't track it, I think it's a cool metric. And if I went back in time, I probably would track it. I don't think I was as exposed to this as a metric at the time. Yeah. And so it just wasn't really on my mind.
I would be curious, now that you and Greg are early retired, about your withdrawal rate. Like,
oh, yeah. And we should know that. One would want to know that, you would think, in early retirement.
Not even necessarily your withdrawal, like how much you're actually taking out, but what your expenses are as a ratio to your, right? Like our net worth is this, and we're
which
spending
is kind
X
of
percent of it.
It's the withdrawal rate, but not the way some people use it, is they assume it's drawdown from like investments. But yes,
it's not how
our overall rate. Yeah, how fast are we spending our net worth?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, is it the 4%? Yeah, and I don't, not necessarily that you need to share that publicly, but like, you can just tell me.
But I include market growth in that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
if I do include market growth, I can tell you now it's you've
spent less than
negative.
What it's grown.
I've spent less than what it's grown. Yeah, which is fascinating, like bananas to me. And I know a Purple Life, who's on Instagram and shares a lot of her metrics. Same thing. Her net worth is growing faster than she can spend it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting number to look at. I think what I was thinking of is more like, and you'd have to choose the date, I guess, but like if you took either your average net worth for 2023 or like what your net worth was on January 1st or like the end of 2023, and then like what your expenses were in 2023.
Yeah.
And what, we talk a lot about the 4% rule, but like, are you actually spending 4%? Is it 5% some years, 3% some years? I just think that's interesting.
No, I agree. I think it's interesting too. I would love for you to measure that for me.
I'm happy.
I'll get my accountant on it right away, which is Greg. So we'll see. I am curious what it is now.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we can wrap this discussion up with a little bit of a motivation on like how to increase your savings rate, right? I like to leave people with something action oriented of like, yes, measure it. We think it's important. I think we've made that point. Mm-hmm. But what if you now know it? And you're just like, okay, cool. I want to increase it because I've seen that Mr. Money mustache chart and I'm, I want to lower the number of working years until retirement.
Yeah. I want to save that extra 5%, get that extra 5 or 6 years. Well, I mean, there's really the places you can move the needle here the most are your biggest expenses. Like canceling Netflix, skipping guac on your burrito is probably not going to change your savings rate. But looking at the 3 biggest expenses for most people are housing, transportation, and food.
I will say, I agree with you. Yes, and Andrew and I's episode last week was all about savings hacks, and I'll put a link in the show notes to it. But we made a point in there, which I do agree with, which is, maybe not skipping the guac on the burrito, but a lot of small to medium-sized things can add up to, and I put food in that category too, right? But a lot of these different things, some of them in the housing, transportation, food, and some of them not, can add up to $1,000 a month, right? Mm-hmm. And adding $12,000 a year to your savings rate can be a lot. Right. Or to the, numerator of your savings rate can be a lot. And so I wouldn't sleep on if you feel like your housing and transportation are hard to, and even food potentially are hard to impact. I wouldn't give up there. Right. I agree. Those are the biggest ones. And if you have like a big goal to early retire or some kind of big audacious financial goal, you might need to attack those big 3. But I do want to give some hope to the people who feel like those are not fixed, but hard things to adjust in their lifestyle at this point, because there are other things you could focus on if you had to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could definitely go to different places in your budget and find, just as an example, right? Like you could probably get a roommate and maybe have $1,000, save $1,000 a month because the roommate is paying $1,000 towards your rent or your mortgage. Or you could like find $100 from your grocery budget and $100 from your travel budget and $100 here and there. I think, I mean, this is like a classic debate about personal finance, right? Like, should you sweat the smaller decisions or not? And it depends on like where you are. It depends on where your income is. It depends on like where you are in your journey. I actually, when I was in my sort of quasi-healthy obsession with savings rate, it was an interesting number to look at. Sometimes I was obsessed with it in a way that was like not totally great. And sometimes it was really grounding because I would feel like, oh, I had this month where I just didn't go grocery shopping and I was eating this Whole Food salad bar every day. And we had this parking ticket I had to pay. And then I would get to the end of the month and be like, oh, that actually like did not move the needle because those were all pretty small expenses. And it was actually helpful to understand like, oh, you felt like you had an expensive month, but you didn't really.
And yeah, kind of, I think you're right on it depends where you're at and just what your expenses are. But you're right. There's times when like you don't need to sweat that stuff. It doesn't really matter. But I forgot, Liz, that you and I also did the episode on getting lean. And if you need to get lean during tougher times, the sort of things like we'd consider cutting. So that's an interesting episode to listen to. If you're inspired by the idea of measuring your savings rate and you want to think about how to improve yours, I think that that episode about savings hacks with Andrew and I, and then the one with you and I around what we would cut, and we shared a lot about like what we're spending money on too, would be interesting to listen to as follow-ons to this. I think another important reminder is you do not have to have the highest savings rate. All of this depends on what your goals are, right? So a higher savings rate is a faster path to FI, but you should balance that with the life you want to live. Like in that example you just gave, Liz, right? Don't stress yourself out over things that are happening to you in life or choices that you're making or priorities and intentional things you want to spend on if it doesn't affect your goals in life, right? And so I had a goal at some point to early retire. And so I was really focused on my expenses and I like tracking my expenses. But if you don't have that goal and you may just, like we said very early on, you might just want to get to where you have a really healthy emergency fund. You might want to get to where you have a few years of expenses covered. And I've talked to a lot of people lately that just want to take a sabbatical. They just want to take a couple years off. And I'm like, that is awesome. And do it. And don't wait till you get 25 times your salary. Just get 3 years. Get a couple years saved, right? Get 6 months, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And go and take that time off and figure out what you want to do next. And so I think it is a great point just to clarify, like, you don't need to be obsessed with this number if it doesn't align with your financial goals.
Yeah, there is, besides likes on Instagram, there actually is no trophy for the highest savings rate. And I think in earlier days as the FIRE movement was becoming a thing, like it was all about cutting your expenses, like how cheap can you live? That's the hack to being able to retire early.
Yeah, I mean, that was Mr. Money Mustache's big thing, right? He was really, really lean, like leaner than a lot of people would feel comfortable getting.
Yeah. And when I was talking to Andrew, one of the other co-hosts last night, like, hey, I'm recording this episode tomorrow. Like, I just wanted to, because sometimes I listen to episodes and I'm like, oh, I wish you'd like shared the show. I would have had this really great point to make. Not that I needed to like join and record, but just like, don't forget about this one thing. But then usually, do you know what actually always happens? I'm listening to the episode and I'm like, but don't forget about this other thing. And then someone says it and I'm like, okay, good.
Oh,
great.
Funny. I should put like the show notes on like in our list of episodes, I should put a link to the show notes so everybody can go. They're not like secret,
Yeah.
That way you can go in and audit.
I would dorkily be like, well, what about, here's my...
I would actually think it'd be helpful because there are times that we get comments from somebody afterwards and they're like, well, oh, you didn't mention this. And I'm like, well, look, we're never going to mention everything.
Yeah.
But had I known that in advance, I would have mentioned it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Had
yeah.
I thought about it.
Well, so I was talking to Andrew last night. We were just emailing a little bit and he was sharing with me... Andrew is very meticulous about a lot of things, including his savings rate and savings. He even said... He was like, oh, I just try to put like one of our paychecks into our taxable brokerage. And that way I know I'm saving at least 50%. I was like, that is much higher than 50%. But like, all right, that's not where I am. And he shared this excerpt from a Mr. Money Mustache. We're really plugging that guy today.
I know, yeah.
For one of his blog posts. And it's interesting. Andrew was like, this is like the golden thing to know. So I'll just read it. The most important thing to note is that cutting your spending rate is much more powerful than increasing your income. The reason is that every permanent drop in your spending has a double effect. It increases the amount of money you have left over to save, and it permanently decreases the amount you'll need every month for the rest of your life. So your lifetime passive income goes up due to having a larger investment nest egg because you're investing more. And then it more easily meets your needs because you've developed more skill at living efficiently and thus you need less. And I don't know about you, but I was like, that's true. Like that math is true. And that feels so old school, like ultra frugal, cut expenses, like just get to that FI finish line as fast as you can, which is like not doesn't resonate with me.
Well, I like his thinking for what it's worth. If it speaks to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if that, again, if you find that challenge to be fun and not misery inducing.
Right.
But I think what's interesting, and that we could do like a whole future episode on this, is like Mr. Money Mustache and like Carl and Mindy, who have I can't even name all their podcasts, but some people recognize those names. And Mindy from Bigger Pockets, and she has a new podcast called Mindy on Money.
Oh, yeah,
Mindy
I
and
saw
Carl on Money. They kind of throw in the end, but it's really like Mindy on Money is the nice alliteration there. And they've been on Ramit's podcast. The Mad Scientist has been on Ramit's podcast. I think these people who kind of grew up in the FIRE community and built the FIRE community in many ways, they now my interpretation from the outside of kind of watching, not even watching super closely, is they now actually have so much money they can't spend it. Mm-hmm. And so they're all very inspired by like Daiwa Zero and Ramit pushing them to like enjoy their lives and enjoy the money they have. And and it's actually hard for them to spend more money because they've become so ingrained in we've talked about it here a bit of like what got you here are the habits you need to now change. Like you got to this ability to early retire and this nest egg built up, and it's now kind of growing faster than what you're even comfortable spending. And so, why are you limiting certain things in life? And, you don't have to be as focused on spending so little all the time now is kind of the point. And so I think I've seen some of them even shifting their habits. So I think even Mr. Money Mustache, like, I don't know him personally, but I get the impression from watching certain things on social media that he's even more comfortable spending money now.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think that's generally the trend that we're seeing is like, people were first started talking about it, and I was like, did you know that if you spend and the less you spend, the quicker you get there? It's just interesting. I think and no one is wrong here, right? Like it's all just, okay, like what am I leaning into? Like what resonates the most with me? And you can only cut expenses so much. You actually have like unlimited potential to grow your income. Whereas like you can only, once you get down to like zero, like you can't go any lower. If you could live on like $100 somehow magically, you can't go any lower than that. So it's both and.
Yeah. And I don't think this is a bad trend. I mean, this is a trend that I personally would say I've actually followed, which is, I really tightened my belt for a number of years because I had this big audacious goal, and it was kind of fun's the wrong word to me, but I limited certain things in my life at the time. Now I'm on the flip side of that, and I don't have a big income coming in anymore. And so I still feel limited in many ways, but I actually feel more comfortable spending money now, and it feels good. It's almost like, it's like a lot of things in life, like you put in the work up front and then you reap the benefits and the fruits of your labor. And so I don't think it is I even think about, the lessons I want to teach my kids. Like, yeah, I want you to enjoy your life along the way, but there's times when you need to work hard and buckle up and, work towards a goal. And then there's times that you enjoy what you've benefited from by getting to that goal. Right. And that is an important but like experience of how life works.
Now that we're talking about it more, I wonder if that's just a common swing for a lot of people, right? You kind of start getting into your finances, you get really excited, you spend way too much time color coding your spreadsheet, adding your credit card cash back so that you get that savings rate from like 53% to 54% in your chart. Yeah. And then you just kind of and then you just chill. I feel like the same. I got really, really into it at the beginning, and that's the same for a lot of hobbies, right? You pickleball, anything, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so into it. This is my whole personality. Yeah. And then you relax.
Well, we evolve as people. We learn, just things change. And then I have heard there's a lot of things, like I feel like I saw a podcast that was titled something like Is Fire Dead? And it might have been Carl and Mindy. I can't even remember whose podcast it was. And it was because I think like even your comment of like the way Mr. Money Mustache was talking about that was sort of very old school FIRE, right? And I do think the FIRE community is evolving to some extent, but everybody's different. We're all humans, as you like to say, and we do things differently, and we're going to learn and evolve over time, and that's good and that's okay. And anyways, this would be a good future podcast discussion because we could probably go deeper down this. But on the savings rate front, I hope this was helpful.
Yeah.
Do you think we did it all?
I think so. Wait, can I say one other funny thing?
Yeah, you can say whatever you want. And then I'll tell you the SNL skit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, shoot. Okay, I'll go quick because I want to know. Back in the day when I was very into making beautiful Instagram posts about my savings rate, and I would look at other people's, and I would always want to know, like, okay, well, like, how are you counting it? Because, of course, I was, like, comparing myself too. I mean, whether that was a good thing to do or not, I just wanted to know, like, how I was doing relative to other people who made about the same amount of money as I did or were about the same age as me. But I saw this one family, and I don't want to say they were doing it wrong, but I was like, the person I was at the time was like, that is not fair. That is not right, because they were essentially counting side hustle income like against their expenses. And so they were like every month they were like, our savings rate was like 130%. And I'm sitting there thinking like, wait, how is that possible? And it was because like they were, any money that they earned through doing any kind of side hustles, they just added that to their savings. And like their side hustles were more than what their expenses were in the month. So rather than adding it to the top of the fraction and the bottom of the fraction, like we earned this money and we saved it, they only added it to the top of the fraction. And I was
well, you got to treat a side hustle just like you'd treat a W-2 job.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I was like, I mean, obviously I would never tell those people like you're doing it wrong, but inside my head, I was like, that is, I mean, you can calculate whatever way you want, except that way that is wrong.
So you can do it wrong. Moral of the story. Okay, but for those people who just realized they've been doing it wrong all this time, according to you, they can go watch this SNL skit and have some positive affirmations to feel better about themselves. Because I finally remembered what skit I was thinking of. Do you remember Stuart Smalley?
Oh, yeah.
He was like, hold on, I'm playing it. Can you hear this?
No.
Oh. He was like, I'm playing it on YouTube, but he's like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
Yeah.
And he would like have this whole, and then he would give like all these different affirmations. And
I don't even know if I watched that skit, but I feel like it became a thing that people would say, like, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough.
Yeah.
And gosh darn it, people
we
like
have the tiniest age difference. And I sometimes think like just the tiniest, like the content that you know, somebody kind of was, it's not just age, but it's also a little bit of like, you know, like I would watch SNL with my brother as a kid or something. And he was a little bit older than me. So I was probably watching stuff I shouldn't even have been watching.
Yeah. My parents were pretty strict about what I was allowed to watch. That probably also exacerbates that.
I think my parents were really not strict. I remember watching Melrose Place with my mom. And I can't remember how old I was, but like when I think about the content on Melrose Place, I'm always like, it probably wasn't appropriate, age appropriate, but whatever.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to watch MTV. I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons, but okay. I think there's actually
that's a cartoon.
That's true. I mean, it has some pretty...
there could be some pretty like bad raunchy cartoons,
but mostly I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons. Not because I think there's actually like a lot of valid reasons you wouldn't want your young children watching The Simpsons, but it was because the kids called adults by their first name.
That's the reason?
That was the
Wow, we need a whole nother deep dive on that.
We were, yeah, like I was
that
only
is very strict.
I was only allowed to call adults like Miss or Mr. or Mrs.
Wow.
And then, you know, so
I don't think anyone ever really was paying that much attention to me and what I was doing. That sounds really sad, but I just mean like there was definitely nobody like monitoring the content we were watching.
Yeah.
Also, this Stuart Smalley, I just on YouTube, it is nice because whoever posted it, it's like an official SNL post, says this particular clip I found was aired in 1992.
Oh.
So I was like, because I was like, wait, how old was I? I would have been 12 then. So while you were not watching The Simpsons, I was watching Melrose Place, SNL. Lots of MTV, and
I was probably watching Saved by the Bell. At that point.
I was also watching that.
Amazing. All right. Well,
okay, let's tie this back into savings rate. We can't, but yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. But anyways,
to all of it.
Thanks, and we love you.
Thanks, and we love you. We always appreciate you spending some time with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, we love it if you want to give us a written review on Apple Podcasts or leave us a rating on Spotify. By the way, this was like months ago, but we hit the goal of 100 by our 1-year birthday week. So we got to like 111 that week, and it was very exciting.
I like the reviews that say who their favorite co-host is. and why.
Oh, yeah.
Even if
I
it's,
think we
I'm
made
not
a
just
joke
saying,
to say that.
yeah, like not just saying like I like it when they say Liz, but I like it when they're like, I love Andrew and how he's obsessed with numbers, or I love, this person and that person for this reason. I think those are really fun. So just if you can't think of what to say, I'm just saying like that's a thing you could.
Yeah, I know, because that's a good point. I think sometimes even when I leave a review for a podcast, I'm always like, oh, where do I begin?
I
What
like
do
it.
I say?
I listen to it and I like it.
Well, I did get one that I think was a positive review. I mean, it was 4 stars versus 5 stars, but thank you nonetheless. And it was, sometimes I'm not sure if someone did that on purpose or if they just like messed up.
Yeah,
When you hit the stars, their finger hit in the wrong place. But anyways, I mean, when it's 1 star, I know your finger didn't hit in the wrong
Right,
place. But when
right.
it's 4 or 5, it could have been an honest mistake. ADHD friendly was the title. And I was like, I don't know if this... Thank you. I mean, I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm sure I could have it. And then someone said, as a fellow Emory alum and ADHDer, I especially enjoy Maggie's cadence and energy.
I like that. That's
So I
a
think it was
compliment.
nice. Yeah, I think it was okay. That was
You
a
might
compliment.
see
I wasn't sure.
if you're. I think you mentioned before that you, with your new good health insurance, you got back into therapy, and I started seeing a new therapist a little while ago, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I can actually do ADHD assessments too."
Oh.
And so we didn't get. There's like a questionnaire and then an interview, and I did the questionnaire. We haven't done the interview yet because we ran out of time this week because I want to talk about something else. And she was like,
Because
"You
have
are."
ADHD.
Wow.
You're like, we couldn't finish the assessment because I wanted to talk about something else. Can I just diagnose you now? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
But she said, she was like, I was actually surprised. I gotta finish this whole thing because she was like, oh yeah, you're like the 100th percentile. And I was very surprised by that because on all the questions I was like, oh, sometimes. Like I wasn't like, oh, all the time.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Well, maybe you were giving your answer and then she was writing a different answer like next to it. I don't know. I
She
don't
was
know
like,
how
I
those work.
met you.
That is cool. I kind of quit going to that therapist last year, and then I started re-going to my really expensive therapist. I'm like on the fence on what I'm willing to pay for these days. Because as Greg reminds me, I should just meditate, and it would get me like, partially where I want to be. But it is interesting. I think it'd be interesting to like look for someone that does that assessment. I sometimes though am like, what would I do with that information? Because I already kind of
Yeah.
have self-diagnosed myself with many things. Mm-hmm. And I'm just not sure what I do with a formal diagnosis other than feel like I properly diagnosed myself.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I was like, we can do it if you want to. We don't have to. I don't think I need to like necessarily
Put a name on this.
take action here, but
If you were watching the video, I'm saying put a name on this, and I put like a frame around myself.
around.
Because I'm good enough. I'm smart
Right.
enough. And
Yeah.
doggone it, people like us, Liz.
People do
Oh, well,
like us,
point
especially
is-
if they're still listening.
We got off this. This all started with, if you like us, go leave a review. I think we were trying to say goodbye, but in
Challenges
our
with
own-
focus, us?
I know. No, not us. Okay, well, we appreciate you guys listening. If you want to share this episode with a friend or family member and maybe talk about your savings rates, that would be awesome. You can subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have any thoughts or questions, you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370. Or you can hit us up on Instagram. Someone just texted me last night, Liz. His name was Patrick. It was very nice. He had a quick question. He wanted a Wealthfront referral code.
Oh, that's
And I
great.
sent him one. It was very nice. And he said he listened to the podcast. Nice.
Oh, well, thanks for
Anyways,
listening, Patrick.
point is, thanks, Patrick. And if you text us, I do actually reply. And if I don't, it's just because I've somehow missed it. So text us again.
Okay, I'll do it. I'm just going to start
Okay.
texting the number and being like, hello, this is a
Can
stranger.
We're never going to finish this episode, but I got a call on my personal cell phone. This number is not my personal cell phone. It's the like Inside Out Money. Mm-hmm. I got a call on my personal cell phone from someone, and it was like a super confusing exchange because I get a lot of sales calls, but I often have to answer my phone because we're like doing a bunch of work at the rental property and dealing with contractors, and I like didn't know everybody's number who was following up with me. Anyways, it was someone for the podcast that was like trying to leave a message, and it sort of threw me off guard, and it was like in a moment when I didn't want to be like interrupted. And then I was like, oh, I didn't even have the chance to get into it with him, but I was like, how did you even get this number? It was kind of interesting.
Oh, that is interesting. I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's way too easy to find people's information.
It's not, I know. It's
these days.
more of like, how did you get that? We share this number in a million places, and that number is not.
Yeah.
you know, and so I was like, well, you had to like look for that number. Like, where did you find it?
I get emails all the time like, oh, I know you have a podcast. Like, and it's one thing, like I get Instagram DMs all the time that are like salesy, some are scammy, but getting emails, it's like, hey, I know you have a podcast and like, are you interested in help producing it or promoting it? And I'm like, how did you get this email?
But are they sending it to your Liz Gets Loaded email?
Yeah, but I don't, but that's the other thing is I don't like use that.
Oh yeah, but I could tell you that is like registered on your where you bought your website URL, which is public information. So there's a bunch of places I get emails like that too. There's a bunch of places they can get your business email. Sometimes even on your LLC registration if you have one.
I don't, but
and there's companies that like buy those databases essentially.
Yeah, okay, that makes
to market
sense.
to. So
I was thinking like
more
Spotify for podcasters had like sold my information, which would be fine. I wouldn't really care about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a free tool. They very well are and have sold your information.
Yeah,
so.
I'm sure. Well,
okay. I don't remember what this podcast was about, but I think we did something.
We are not
today.
saving you any time, but we do hope that we're saving you money.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Exactly.
We love you so much.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Round and round.